Welcome back to the Grow with Glow podcast. Today I'm going to chunk down some of the information we got from Dan Henderson, who I'm going to refer to in this podcast as Hendo. Now look, when we do these interviews, oftentimes what happens is there are conversations going on for an hour before we begin with all the setup, cameras, lights, information. He gave us a tour of his facility, his bar, his distillery, and his brew pub. Plenty of time there, probably closer to 90 minutes before we even hit record. And then once we were done, we hung out for another 30, 40 minutes while the team broke things down. He was a gracious host and super generous with his time. But in all of that, what I'm telling you is we probably had triple the time off camera as we did on camera. I had double the time while we were walking around the place to ask questions that oftentimes doesn't make it into the interview. And quite simply, when I put someone on camera or there's an interview, there can be a different persona. Now, I'll be honest, that did not happen with Hendo. He is who he is. You can ask him about a fighter and he'll say, I think that guy's a jerk. What did you feel about Bisping? He said, nobody enjoyed that more than I did. You know, he's super candid. However, when we are off camera, there's just more information that's coming out. And sometimes when we click stop after the interview, people are relaxed. They weren't sure what was coming. I never give them the questions ahead of time. It just kind of flows. And to be honest, I never really preset questions. I want to see where they want to take it. So usually the first 10, 12 minutes is a little bit adjusting, just seeing where this is going to go. And then I kind of pick up a riff and we go with it. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you it isn't structured to where the person can't be themselves. In other words, I want them to be honest and just loose. Having said that, what I'm going to share in this particular breakdown are the topics of food. I'm going to go through microbiome, things that Hendo and I talked about with his exercise, inflammation in his body, how he dealt with low T and what some of the science and research is around that, cryotherapy, the benefits, the controversy. I'm even going to get into cigars because we talked about that off camera. And what I'm going to do with each one of these is give you what may appear to be gentle reminders at first, and quite simply, that's okay with me. But as we pick up steam, what I am going to do is finish with more intellect and more intelligence on this topic than maybe you'd heard before. I'm going to find some journal articles and review them and hopefully do it in a way that's not boring, do it in a way that keeps you engaged in the process. And it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing the most important job in the world, and that's running a household and raising children, or you're in healthcare. I want to provide some things that ultimately are new. A discovery. They're counterintuitive. So while we might start on a topic with a refocus and a gentle reminder of something maybe you forgot, and we want to make sure we're starting out with the same foundation, I'll quickly, in this particular episode, going to work into some science. I'm going to review some journal articles. But like I said, I want to do that in a fun way, not in a way that is boring. As we go through these particular podcasts, I also want to introduce you to a new vocabulary, a new language. And depending on where you are in your business, if you're an entrepreneur or you're running a private practice, you can start to use these words in your education with your clients, with your members. And what I'm talking about is the fact that everybody needs to perform. Everybody needs to show up and get the job done in a high quality fashion. Just being good these days isn't good enough. Just being great doesn't really stand out. You have to be exceptional. You have to want to level up your game and your thinking. And in doing so, you're really going to change the lives of the people around you for the better. And that's what this is all about. So I guess number one is being good isn't good enough anymore. You've got to be great. You've got to be outstanding. And when you break that word down, outstanding, you stand out. There'll be a lot of that too through this podcast, is sharing words with you that I think oftentimes need to be revealed in a little deeper way of what they actually mean. So the 7 topics and journal articles I've kind of cherry picked to go through, again, has to do with food, your microbiome, exercise, inflammatory processes in the body, low T, cryotherapy, and cigars. Now, if you're wondering, can you do cryotherapy and have a cigar? We'll get to that later in this episode. But let's go through a couple words that I think are super important to begin with. Number one, we're all athletes. I think the metaphor for which we live life is super important. If you're an athlete, you have to perform. Now, my terminology when I teach patients is you could be an occupational athlete, which would be police, fire, Sometimes first responder services, very important. They stay healthy well for 30 years. You could be a corporate athlete, which a lot of times we're going to talk about the brain function and the efficiency by which you can achieve projects and also work in a more efficient manner so you have more family time. Again, keeping with that 360 success theme that I often talk about, success at work and at home, success at work and in your personal life. And ultimately, getting people to think along the lines of a industrial athlete, an educational athlete. That would be what I call a teacher. When we do that, I want to be really clear is that your body's got this intelligence. It knows what to do. It knows how to heal. It knows how to find and manifest more energy, if in fact that's what you need, more healing potential. But oftentimes we do things to impede that. So a good example would be if you're pitching a fever, you're not feeling well, oftentimes the nature of your body is to want to sleep. It shuts down the need to process information. It shuts down this desire for food because even digestion takes energy and your body can really focus the energy towards healing. And so this happens innately, intuitively. It's an inborn phenomenon. With your food, one of the things I want to get across, and I'll be saying this regularly, so just to kind of get you caught up on the vocabulary, is we have what I call innate hygiene. That means if you feed essential nutrients and building blocks to your body can do everything it needs to do. It's amazing. You wouldn't necessarily need supplementation and outside products. Now, there is a time and a place for that. There are people who definitely need that. There are health issues that would be a precursor to someone maybe needing things for life. So I'm not adamantly against it. But if we feed your body the innate hygiene it needs, meaning the nutrients are there, the essential building blocks are there, your body can do what it needs to do. If we understand this concept of hormesis is basically a small stressor to the body, which teaches your body the stress response. I'm not a fan of people trying to live in a bubble with their children, trying to keep their kids germ-free all the time. Get your hands in the dirt. Get your fingernails in the soil, go play, go be exposed to germs and viruses. It actually helps your body through this process called hormesis to identify and innately destroy what's coming at you. But if you do live in a bubble and you don't have these exposures, well, quite often your body's not as intelligent as someone who is. So I travel the world. I'm on 4 continents every year speaking, and people go, do you ever worry about the germs? Look, germs are a small variable in factoring whether or not you get ill. More importantly is how do you take care of your body and your immune system? Because the germs are a factor, and quite often the more exposure you have, the more I travel, I feel the stronger my immune system is because my body's been exposed to it. It identifies it and can destroy it, which is in fact why even after COVID, people who had tested positive had natural immunity in places like Europe. They were allowed to travel with passes as though they had been given some kind of synthetic administration. You know what I'm talking about? Synthetically injected into their body. So places like Europe, it was considered the same if you had a natural recovery or when it was being mandated, synthetically pushed into your body, they looked at it as one and the same because, in fact, as things pan out now, being exposed and getting over it is still the best way for your body to recover and be protected into the future, okay? As we go through this, I'm going to resource some of these articles and journal articles where this is coming from. We're going to talk a little bit about inflammation and telomeres. Telomeres have traditionally been the way people decide if you're going to be healthy and what the longevity is. But I'm also going to tell you quantity of years isn't the same thing as quality of life and what inflammation has to do in that process. As we go through things like low T, Dan Henderson talked about low T in his body and how he was supplementing for a while. And then the fight circuit cracked down on it and how he had to do it naturally. And again, off camera, what he told us were his natural solutions, and I'll be sharing that as well as we go through this. And while there are articles that are hard to find on the topic of dairy, Dan said he pulled dairy out of his diet because he felt like it was an inflammatory process. He just felt slow. He felt like there was extra calories there. I'm going to tell you that Got Milk was brought to you by the American Dairy Association, the ADA. Got Milk. They made it cool. They made it hip. They were on television. It's their product. And so the American Dairy Association is also very protective on articles against their product. It's just not natural for humans to walk around sucking on the teats of a cow in the middle of a field. That's weird, right? No other animal drinks the milk of another animal. You're just meant to drink the milk of your mother. That's it. And so these concepts that sometimes we have normalized in society, I want to get to the bottom of that as well and show you at least there's a better way to do things, because these are my words. The American Dairy Association, when it comes to the topic of milk, it truly is the sacred cow. Yeah, that pun was intended. That was not a cheap shot, just calling it like it is. Here's the deal. We're going to get into some of the studies when it comes to quality of your food. Henderson talked about eating clean food. It's okay to have marbleized steaks, ribeyes. There is such a thing as healthy fats. The concepts on these things have been changed and altered over the years, where, a lot of times things like butters and fats and marbleized steaks were the bad thing. We're going to kind of demystify this as we go through, but let's just start with this. There was a study done. It was an epidemiology study. And the citation was written by Dr. Hu, and one of the things that they concluded in this study was an epidemiological factor and perspective in the Journal of Internal Medicine. I'm going to give you the shorts on some of these articles because I don't want to read you the articles. They can be boring, but essentially the factor is this: the quality of your foods matter. The quality of the foods is more important than the calories or the quantity of your foods, especially when we talk about reducing inflammation. Now, there are foods that are known to spike inflammation in the body. There is not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to your body, and they often recommend that the diet be introduced slowly with new foods if you haven't been having them for a while. So in other words, if someone's been a vegan for a year and they start to reintroduce meat, there has to be this slow process so your body rebuilds the enzymes. There are foods in certain regions of the world people can eat no problem, whereas if somebody's visiting, it would be a problem. But your body's smart. Adaptation is a word you're going to hear a lot from me, because your body will adapt and understand that the quality of the food is important, okay? And if we start to look at this, the Journal of Internal Medicine's huge when it comes to quality of the inflammatory process in the body, not just what are you doing to eliminate the inflammation from an outside in, but actually from an inside out. And again, that's that innate hygiene. What you put into your body really matters, okay? Number 2, the Journal of Current Biology. This was in 2006 by Biaggi. And what they did is they actually studied 24 centurions. And what that means is people over 100 years old. The reason I like this is 24 is a lot for a study. When we're talking about people over the age of 100, they compared them to people mid-20s all the way through mid-40s. And what they talked about, honestly, was that your microbiome, your gut health, matters to longevity. In fact, they went so far as to say because it's important on human metabolism and immunology, the gut microbiome has been proposed as a possible determinant in your healthy aging. Meaning, if you want to live a long time, quality of years, not just quantity, you've got to take care of your gut microbiome. Now, if you listen to the last episode with Dr. Mindy Pelz, we talked about fasting, resetting the gut microbiome. I gave you markers, 18 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, what happens at 72 hours, almost like the markers to push you through, because there can be a total reset of the gut. Now, it might be inconvenient to not eat for 3 days, but if it really means you get a reset in your body and your microbiome, which eventually leads to longevity, well, hey, if you can do it, then I'm going to say you can teach your patients to do it. You can suggest this to your parents who you want to be around longer to play with your children. You can suggest it to your spouse who's maybe going through a health crisis or healing crisis, or maybe has some kind of impediment to their health that they just need a natural reset. And so these are things I want to suggest to you, where if I can connect themes from interviews, Mindy Pelz over to Hendo, then it isn't just an author's perspective. It isn't just an MMA world champion perspective. We're going to carry that into even like beach volleyball. I'll talk about Misty May Trainer in a little bit. She's the GOAT of the beach. She's been a patient of mine for almost 20 years at the time of this recording. And I'll talk about her when we get into the cryotherapy sessions and what I learned from her. But again, this study was on centurions, people over the age of 100. And what it suggests is the gut microbiome, the healthier it is, can determine a healthy aging process. And it just makes sense because in a minute, we're going to talk about how inflammation is actually the fuel to breaking down your body and aging. Whole body inflammation is the fuel to aging. And they did a study looking at telomere length. It's not about the telomeres. In other words, your genetics doesn't predetermine that. It's actually your environment and what you choose to do or not do. In other words, the decisions you make. The reason I like that is it's not bad luck, bad genes, or you're part of the bad sperm club. It actually has to do with your choices, which means you're empowered to change them today. After listening to this, you can change your mind and say, look, I'm going to do this a different way, and you're on a different path. And it's just that easy. One simple choice can change your life and put you on a different trajectory. Number 3, looking at exercise. This was an RCT, randomized controlled clinical trial done by Howden in 2018. This came from the Journal of Circulation. And what they found was 2 years of exercise training improved the maximum oxygen uptake, and it decreased cardiac rigidity, or what they called cardiac stiffness in this particular article. What this means in the summary of this, in my words, is simply that it's not too late to start exercising. And if you continually exercise at about the 2-year mark, regardless of age, you're going to start to see some things dramatically change no matter what your age is. That's huge. Now, obviously, there will be some preclusions and things where if people have had major issues and they're restricted to a hospital bed, things like that. But if you start to look at this idea that 2 years of exercise maximally increases the oxygen uptake, decreases cardiac rigidity, that's also going to start to affect things like heart rate variability. HRV is a great predictor also of longevity, living longer, performing better, having clarity. These are also things that Hendo talked about he did in his routine after fights and recovery. Now, most fighters will fight 3 to 4 fights in a year. The reason Dan Henderson didn't go to chiropractic school, even though he was accepted and we would have been classmates, was because he actually won a fight in Japan where he fought 3 fights a day, 3 days in a row, and he won $250,000, $250K. At the time, he was making about $25K a year doing odds and ends for work just so he can keep training and fighting. So when we start to look at what you can do with your resources and with the current information, knowledge is power. When you apply knowledge, then you can execute, right? Knowledge is power, but when you apply the information in your life, you make a decision today to do this, then you can execute. And when you execute, you have results. Welcome to Grow with Glow, the show where we explore ways to stay healthy naturally and grow your influence. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, the clean salt electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. There's no sugar, just the essentials for optimal hydration. Whether you're an athlete, busy professional, or just someone who wants to stay hydrated, Element is designed for you. So what sets Element apart? Well, it's the science-backed formulation. You see, Element is created by experts who understand the importance of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium in maintaining proper hydration and supporting overall health. These electrolytes are crucial for muscle function, energy, and anything that makes Element stand out is its commitment to real, clean ingredients. You won't find any artificial sweeteners or flavors in here. Element is keto-friendly, paleo-friendly, and suitable for a variety of dietary preferences. And here's the best part. For our listeners, Element has a special offer. Your first purchase through the website and the link below in the show notes will get you an offer where a complimentary package is sent with the purchase of your first item. So again, use the link in the show notes, and when you make a purchase, you will get a complimentary pack at no extra fee. You're going to enjoy it, and again, it's paleo and keto friendly, keeping you hydrated. Number 4, we wanted to talk about inflammation. Inflammation levels predict successful aging or lack of successful aging, meaning oxidative stress can make you look much older than you actually are. Inflammation is the prime candidate among potential determinants for mortality and your capability, including cognition, up to an extreme old age. These are risk protectant factors that basically through your lifespan, if you have low levels of systemic inflammation, and these levels rise towards the end of the lifespan. They predict that centurions' mortality, disability rate, and cognitive decline. What that means is even in 100-year-olds, that if there is a high inflammation level, inflammation is the fuel to aging. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Okay. This is from the Journal of EBO Medicine. And again, inflammation in the body is huge. I'm going to talk about reducing inflammation in the body with cryotherapy, cold water exposures, not by taking Advil. And I'll say that again, not by taking synthetics or outside-in approaches, but what would be a natural thing you can do for your environment? What can you do in your home? Simple things. You don't have to depend on your gym to have it. You can buy some of these things. Low T in athletes. Hendo talked about this, having a low T count. If your body can make it, don't take it. Please write that down. If your body can make it, don't take it. If you start injecting free testosterone into your body, it creates a negative feedback loop. And I want you to understand how your body works for performance basis, but also for longevity. Because if you falsely inject something into the body, the brain thinks, okay, we've got enough in the system. It's resourceful. It's very efficient. And the brain will tell you, stop making this testosterone because we have enough. We don't want to overproduce. Somehow it's in the body. Well, it was injected. It's not good. Then if you look at sports like the NFL, which was crazy with steroids and injections in the 80s and early 90s, a lot of those athletes died from testicular cancer or liver failure before the age of 50. There's huge ramifications when you start to do things artificially. So even if you're under the guise of your doctor, your family doctor, ask better questions. And please make note of this. The quality of your questions will equal the quality of your life. You might think journal articles and review articles of scientific literature that I'm doing right now is kind of boring. But if I can arm you with better questions, then ultimately you're going to challenge your doctor. And I know as a doctor, when people ask me questions, it gets me thinking at a higher level. If you are passive in any system, as time goes on, you're going to realize that will harm you. To be active, to ask, to push back a little bit, I encourage it in my practice. I want you to do that in your personal life and do it for your kids. When you ask questions, you'll get better care. When you ask questions, you'll get better service. Just ask. And if you're willing to do that based on a modicum of information, maybe some of the sound bites I'm giving you, well, then all of a sudden you're going to have much higher quality answer, better health solutions, and hopefully you don't become a statistic that there are thousands of people that die every year just in the U.S. from medical mistakes, from prescription drugs taken correctly, and it costs people their lives. So I don't want that for you. So ask better questions. But when it comes to testosterone, and this was a big one for Hendo, because for a little while in the fight game, he was allowed to take this, and then they regulated down because it was being abused, and he had to find some natural solutions. So reduced testosterone concentration alone does not necessarily warrant testosterone treatment. So just because you're low T doesn't mean you need testosterone treatment. Okay. This is a study that was done by Hooper, Tenford, and Hackney in the Journal of Physician of Sports Medicine. And I believe this is 2018. Okay. So if you want to go back and look these things up, here's the deal. Testosterone levels change as you age. It's a natural process. So please know that if you are going to ask some questions, have a reference point that your testosterone levels change as you age. You've all seen like a crazy jacked up 18-year-old. Let's just call it what it is. You got an 18-year-old male. They're horny, right? Testosterone levels change as you age and are different. Now, if you spit your coffee, when I said the word horny, my apologies. It is one of those words, isn't it? Testosterone levels change as you age and are different person to person. Some of the ideas here is that often testosterone treatment will accompany low T test results, and you're going to have some symptoms. And some of those symptoms would be like inability for sexual function. Okay, that's a good indicator that your T is dropping big time. Be careful of some of the testosterone treatments that may blast you with testosterone for that negative feedback loop. And I hope that makes sense. The brain to body are always connected. And if the brain notices free testosterone, it's not going to make it. It's going to shut it down. If you're supplementing or taking high amounts, you may be cutting off your testosterone production forever. And then the more you take artificially can lead to other negative ramifications. So be smart about this, right? Now, once a week, I schedule thinking time. If I can do it daily, I'm going to say this to the entrepreneurs, I schedule thinking time. If I'm having a hard time getting away from the business, I'm working in the businesses too much, not on them, then I schedule thinking time, which usually requires a cigar. Now, when I smoke cigars, a lot of people don't like the smell. They don't like the smoke, which means I get isolated. It's beautiful. I like to isolate myself on the beach in a patch of sun. And because it's smoky and stinky, nobody bothers me. Thinking time. How long do I think? The length of the cigar. Here's what they did on the study of cigar smoking as a beneficial factor for your health. Yeah, this is where we want to take this as well. This was from the International Journal of Andrology, and this was from Svartberg and Jordy in 2007. And basically what they found was it all depends on the person, and you can actually have an increase in testosterone from smoking cigars. You will have an increase in testosterone from lifting heavy things. There's been a study on males that walk 8,000 steps per day can increase their T count from walking 8,000 steps per day. So if you want to increase your testosterone, start walking close to 10,000 steps. Kind of in fun, I'm saying, hey, having a cigar, but the idea is it's almost that hormesis effect. A little bit of a stressor to the body can actually kickstart the body. A little bit of a stressor can actually make your body react. A little bit of exposure to a germ can build up an immunity. So zero stress in life, zero exposure to germs, I don't think is recommended. You need to have a little bit. If I can stress my body with a small amount of carcinogens by having a cigar, but it causes me to relax and think at a higher level, and by relaxing increases my testosterone, well then maybe you should consider a cigar a week. Not every day, and don't inhale, and there's other things that go with it. But this idea of hormesis, I think, is really big for people to understand that zero exposure is probably not your best plan for staying healthy. You can't control all the outside variables. You can control a lot of times what goes on inside. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Journal of Arthritis, Research in Therapy. We start to look at inflammation in the body and cryotherapy. Here's the deal. There's a pivotal role for the sympathetic nervous system, your stress response system, and its neurotransmitters when we get cold exposure. It could be air, it could be snow, but a lot of times this is cold plunges, meaning cold water. Where I first saw this was with Misty May Trainer, the GOAT of beach volleyball. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. I'm going to get her on this podcast. And she's been a patient for a number of years. Before she went to the Beijing Olympics, so that would have been 2008, she went to Beijing and won gold. And then she went to London and won gold again. So probably back in 2006, 2007, she was filling up a large bin, a trash bin basically, that was not used for trash. It was sanitized. She would fill it up halfway with water. And then she'd put in about 80 pounds of ice per day, just ice bags, dump them in. She had a small ladder. She would jump in, and she was doing cryotherapy for 7 and 8 minutes to the point of shivering and stimulating her brown fat, the adipose tissue. And what that is called is thermogenesis. And basically what she was doing, they then later studied in 2013 in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences. And what they did is they found out that actually cold exposure, and the Journal of Arthritis talked about how inflammation cause an increased activity of the sympathetic nervous system, which is your stress response. Cold exposure reversed that. On a systemic level, the signals from the sympathetic nervous system are pro-inflammatory. In other words, if you're stressed out all the time, you're creating an inflammatory response in your body. You're releasing more cortisol in the body, which has a negative effect, and it continues to create that inflammation in the body. However, when you lower your body temperature through cryotherapy, cold exposure, the body burns calories, activates brown fat adipose tissue, and also creates an appropriate response to calming systemic inflammation. Again, we look at telomere length, which was often used as a predictor for longevity, and inflammation in the body. What's more important is the inflammation in the body. We start looking at things that are really important within your body. And you can also look up a book called Winter Swimming by Dr. Soderstrom. And even if you're going to be doing cold plunging, The best way to do that is at the end of the workout. I was doing this incorrectly. I read some of the Her Journal articles, and what I was doing the cold plunge first thing in the morning, get myself psyched up, jump in there for, 3-4 minutes. And at the end of that, then I would jump into a sauna, and we can do some future podcasts on the benefits of sauna, cold plunging, dive into the details of this. But actually what I want you to get from the recipe of this is you should finish with a cold plunge. Now, there's been some theories that the shivering is best for you, and I do believe that. But they've also shown in these studies that you don't need to shiver to have the benefit of a cold plunge. And if you cold plunge last in your series of workouts, in other words, I lift weights, I go to the sauna, and then I finish with the cold plunge, don't start with it like I was doing, but finish with it, then ultimately you get the benefit of the thermogenesis, the fat burning process throughout the day. And again, what I've noticed, and part of the reason that's inspired me to do this podcast, is I have athletes that do things for themselves and they don't sit around reading journal articles. Now, I'll give you some high points. We just went through 7 or 8 articles today. But oftentimes what I see, and I want you to understand, is that the athletes will do things that work. Their livelihood depends on it. And the science will catch up 3, 4, 5 years later. Science catches up with what these athletes do. So I've often had people challenge me and say, well, where's the science? I said, oh, they'll catch up. And I want you to know that too. These are things that Misty was doing. She is the GOAT of beach volleyball almost 20 years ago. That's how long she's been a patient. Her husband, Matt Trainer, is the guy that I sat down with Hendo and interviewed. That's her husband. And they have 3 beautiful daughters. How they live their life is very natural. How they did their childbirth was very natural and not in a hospital setting. As we go through this, I want you to start to challenge your thinking and even ask better questions. In other words, what would it be like to deliver a baby with a midwife instead of in the emergency room? Crazy concepts like that all of a sudden with some thought and some active participation by you, you'll achieve a higher level of health and get the results you want. But don't count on the system to hand deliver these questions to you, because the American Dairy Association wants you to stay away from the quote-unquote sacred cow and not question the value of cow's milk, but just take the product. The pharmaceutical companies aren't going to hand you natural health solutions. In fact, they're guilty of suppressing some natural health solutions because they want you to take their synthetic products. It has to do with profitability. And if you don't believe me, just go to their websites and look at what pharmaceutical companies stand for. They don't talk about increasing science. They talk about increasing profitability to their shareholders. Just look it up. And if you are a passive participant in this system, I'm afraid you will become a statistic. That is the harsh reality. That is a motivation for doing this podcast, is to bring things in front of you first with stories, gentle reminders, and little refocus on things you probably already knew. But then I want to quickly build you up, work you up the ladder to then possibly even reviewing some scientific articles. And if you enjoyed this today, please let me know, because I don't want this to be boring. I want you to tap into your innate hygiene. Feed the essential nutrients through your diet without synthetic powders or even extra potions and lotions and supplements. There's a time and a place for it, but not as much as we do it. We overdo it. Dan Hendo, low T, lift heavy weights, proper sleep. He's supplemented with zinc. If you have those problems, ask questions about zinc supplementation. Your doctor will go, yeah, I guess you could take it. Some studies have shown that. Here's the amount you would need on your body weight, your body size, and those things are particular. But if you don't know to ask about zinc and low T, you never will. If you have low T or you've just noticed a dip in your blood work, start lifting heavy things. Maybe you've noticed you got away from lifting weights and that's why it dipped. Look, some of these things with a little bit of thought and your participation, you'll achieve better results. But if you are passive in this healthcare system, it is broken. And unfortunately, what happens is it'll sweep you up and possibly affect you or your loved ones. So you could listen to this as a casual hobby, or you could get active and serious about this, which is how I suggest you do this. I'll bring you some celebrities. I'll bring you some athletes, some people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Cool stories and fun vibes. And then I'm going to break it down and get serious, because I think this is where we need to go in our healthcare, is responsibility falls to you. The responsibility is on us. It's incumbent on us to ask these questions, to seek out alternatives, or the big machines, the big corporate agendas are going to continue to roll out. You have to look no further than who pays the most for lobbyists in Washington, D.C. as to why the rules are the way they are. Big Pharma is either number 1 or number 2 every year. And what they suppress, what they push aside, we'll never know fully. But my guess, my hypothesis, is there's a lot more they don't want us to know than we do know. So as I read these articles, if you find it boring, my apologies. If you find it insightful, it's not so much that you need to learn exactly the year in the journal article, but get the message and formulate that into a way to ask a question of your healthcare practitioner, right? Formulate it into a way that challenges this broken, jacked up system so that it doesn't suck you up or your family. And that, my friends, is a heartfelt message. Today we talked about food. Natural's better ties into your innate hygiene. I want you to be familiar with that phrase. We talked about the microbiome. The better it is, the longer you'll live. And it just makes sense from a longevity perspective if you realize over 50% of your immune system is in your gut. So if it's functioning correctly, then your immune system's fired up correctly. You'll live longer. You won't have these things that take you out. Exercise. Anytime you choose to start is good when you stay consistent for at least 2 years. Even older populations had major changes. Inflammation. It is more important than telomere length. In other words, it's more important than your genetics, which is what we call epigenetics. How you choose to live your life and the environmental factors you put yourself in and how you challenge your body is more important than bad luck or bad genes for most people. Low T, try simple things first. Look at zinc, definitely be getting proper sleep. That was a big part of other studies, longitudinal studies, proper sleep for people with testosterone issues. Cigars, that's my fun one, but having a cigar, a little thinking time is good for everybody. And then cryotherapy, again, my athletes, the people I take care of, they've done things for years that are super intelligent. I just know that the science is going to catch up to us. So when someone asks me, where's the science? My best answer is, they'll catch up. Hey, until next time, my name is Dr. Brad Glowaki. This is another Grow with Glow episode. I'm hoping to put you on a better path towards health and wellness. And if you find something useful today, comment down below. And if you feel so inclined, maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. Cheers, and I'll see you next time.